Back in the 1930s in Germany, before World War II began, a company called Temmler-Werke was working on a new medicine. In 1937, they came out with a little white pill called Pervitin. It looked super harmless, just a tiny tablet you could buy at the store without needing a doctor's note. But here's the wild part. Inside that little pill was something really strong. It had methamphetamine hydrochloride in it, basically crystal, but totally legal back then. Methamphetamine wasn't brand new though. It was first made in Japan way back in 1893, and by the 1910s, it was made into tablets. But Temmler's version was the one that got really popular, saying it could give you more energy, help you feel confident, stay awake, and even lose weight. People started using it for all sorts of things, staying up late for work, focusing on school, or just feeling good. It got super popular with housewives, students, and factory workers. You could just walk into a pharmacy and buy it like regular medicine. But then the Nazi army found out about it. Back then, people noticed that Pervitin made others feel super awake, really focused, and not scared at all. So someone had an idea. What if soldiers used it in battle? They started trying it out. Soldiers who took Pervitin didn't need much sleep, weren't hungry, and could walk for miles and fight harder. They didn't get scared or stressed out. It was like pressing a magic button. Suddenly, they acted like robots. The German army thought Pervitin was amazing, so they decided to make it a big part of their plans. By 1939, the leaders in charge started making tons of it for the soldiers. And soon soldiers were given the pills during training and battles. Military doctors thought these pills were like magic. They even wrote papers saying Pervitin helped soldiers feel braver and take more risks. By April 1940, when Germany was getting ready to attack France, Pervitin was a key part of their strategy. During the war, German soldiers were given a lot of pills, 35 million, just for one campaign. They took 2 or 3 pills and didn't need to sleep for 2 or 3 days. Some walked over 50 kilometers without stopping. Others stayed awake all night driving tanks. Pilots even flew missions while wide awake from the pills. It gave the Nazis a short-term advantage. Sometimes, they even mixed it into chocolate or candy so it was easier to eat. It became something the army used a lot. The German army also had a plan called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. This plan was all about moving super fast with tanks, planes, and soldiers to surprise their enemies. Pervitin helped the soldiers keep up with the speed and hard work of these attacks. It was a big part of how they fought during the war. The plan was simple: move fast, hit hard, and don't let the enemy catch up. Tanks, planes, and soldiers worked together to break through borders before anyone could react. But this type of fighting wasn't something regular soldiers could handle. They needed people who could stay awake for days, push through being tired, and keep going no matter what. Tank crews would take these little pills so they could stay awake for 3 or 4 days at a time. Even pilots in the air did the same thing. Pilots, especially the ones flying bombers, would stay awake for hours, sometimes 8 to 10 hours, flying across Europe, dropping bombs, and flying all the way back without stopping. On the ground, things were just as tough. Soldiers walked for over 36 hours straight, carrying heavy gear through forests, snow, or muddy roads. Even after all that, they still had the energy to fight. Some of them marched over 80 kilometers in just 2 days, especially during the invasion of France. It was exhausting, but kept them going. Did you know something amazing happened in May 1940 during World War II? The Germans did something no one thought they could do. They sent their tanks through the Ardennes forest. People thought it was way too hard to get tanks through that area, so the French didn't think the Germans would try. But guess what? The Germans did it anyway, and they did it super fast. They surprised the British and French troops and totally caught them off guard. Back in World War II, many Nazi soldiers were running on hardly any sleep. Commanders even told troops to take 2 Pervitin pills a day, and sometimes more during fights to stay awake and alert. But it had a bad side. When it wore off, the soldiers felt terrible. They'd get super tired, feel dizzy, scared, and really weak. Some even collapsed in the middle of battle and couldn't move. Others got angry and confused, not knowing what to do. Some soldiers started seeing things that weren't there, like thinking they were being chased or surrounded by enemies, even though nothing was around. Sometimes, whole groups had to leave the battlefield because everyone suddenly felt awful at the same time. There were even stories about soldiers going crazy, screaming, shaking, or not listening to orders because they thought invisible enemies were attacking them. By the end of 1940, some army doctors noticed that this stuff was causing big problems. They saw people getting addicted, losing their minds, or breaking down emotionally. But even with all that, the army kept using it because it seemed to help for a little while. But it didn't just stop there. These may have made them meaner, more violent, and even more heartless. The SS, or Schutzstaffel, was one of the scariest groups in the Nazi army. They weren't like regular soldiers. The SS was super loyal to Hitler. They followed orders without ever asking questions, and they were in charge of terrible things like running the concentration camps, such as Auschwitz and Treblinka, and leading death squads. There's a lot of evidence that many SS members were addicted, and other strong painkillers. These didn't just make them stronger, they also made them cruel. Together, these made it easier for them to do terrible things without feeling guilty. Some Nazi doctors thought the helped soldiers stay tough, but many of them didn't even care about how the hurt people. They only cared about getting results. In the camps, doctors like Dr. Karl Klauberg and Dr. Edward Wirtz did awful experiments on prisoners. At places like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Sachsenhausen, they gave people to see how long they could survive without food or sleep. It was heartbreaking and cruel. Others were starved while being forced to take, but most of them died in pain. The SS officers in charge were also using a lot of themselves, and it made them lose touch with reality. Some of the SS guards started acting really strange. They would scream at nothing or think the prisoners were trying to attack them, even when nothing was happening. One guard at Majdanek thought he heard prisoners talking in his head, so he started them. But the truth is, they weren't even talking. It was making him do it. Another guard started shaking so much he couldn't stand, and then he got super angry and attacked a prisoner. People who saw it said he was foaming at the mouth, probably because it made him lose control. By 1943, things had gotten really bad in the SS because so many soldiers were using. The Nazi leaders started to notice something was wrong. Reports said the officers were acting strange. Some were unstable, unpredictable, and even completely crazy. They weren't just doing what they were told anymore. They were doing violent, out-of-control things on their own. By the time the leaders tried to stop the use of it, especially in the SS, it was too late. These men were already and their minds were falling apart. Most people think the Nazis were cruel just because of their beliefs, but played a big role too. Didn't make them hate people, but it made it easier for them to follow terrible orders and act with extreme cruelty. It gave them energy, focus, and anger to do awful things for a long time without stopping,